and welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. If this is your first time here, my name is Tiffany and I'm the International Witch. Since my last video, I've had a couple of questions about what journal I'm using, so I just thought I'd give a little review of it. This is the Rêverie journal by Mellow Days in Sage Green. This line of journals is advertised specifically as a watercolor dot grid notebook and has 160 GSM weight, cold pressed watercolor paper. It's the most expensive journal I've ever purchased at $30, but it really is worth it if you plan on using watercolors. However, if you use mostly stickers, then this Clever Fox journal is half the price and does the job just fine. I've purchased like 3 or 4 of these. The pages are thinner, but that's a good thing when you're using stickers, and it was only $10 when I purchased mine. For the theme of this month, I've decided to take inspiration from July's full moon. The full moon in July is often called the buck moon because that is the time whenever deer have shed their antlers and the new antlers are coming through. But it's also known as the wort moon, wort being another name for herb. So this is going to be an herbalism spread. Throughout my journal today, I'm going to be using the Micron number 1 pen and the Micron number 5 pen. This is going to be an extremely long video today, so there's certain points of the video that I'm going to skip. You've already seen me outline and color in titles and using my ruler to create lines, so I'm just going to fast forward through some of those things. Because this is an herbalism spread and I'm going to be using a lot of different shades and tints of the same color, green, I'm not that experienced with it in watercolors. I'm afraid I'll make a big mess. So for today's journal, I'm going to be using some gouache acrylic paints. This is an unusual type spread for me, so I hope that you guys like me pushing my boundaries and enjoy this spread. The reason why this is called the wort or herb moon is because this is typically when you would start harvesting all of your herbs. I am writing the quote in my Micron number 1 pen, and the quote for this month is by Michael Tierra, and it is, "Herbalism is a religion of nature, representing the balance of head and heart," and I thought that was very apt. And here are the simple, cheap Arteza gouache paints that I'm going to be using. I got these off of Amazon. They're nothing expensive, nothing particular, just very simple gouache paints because I tend to go through paints a lot. I've drawn 2 different kinds of medicinal plants on the front. On the left side is the calendula and on the right side is chamomile, and I put deer antlers at the very top. For the antlers, I'm going to be using the colors Pearl White Rose, Latte Brown, and Toffee. I'm going to try to tell you every color that I'm using, but unfortunately, as this video goes longer, it gets more and more difficult because I just start randomly mixing colors that are already on my plate. So I'm really sorry, but I am going to try, I promise. I received a comment on my last video that I was a little too far away from the journal, so I've tried to get a little closer, but that does mean that there's going to be moments that is out of focus or my camera is blurring, and I'm really sorry for that. Also, it took me roughly 3 days to film all of this and paint in my journal. And unfortunately, it was raining and cloudy every single one of those days without fail. I have ordered some new lights that a viewer had suggested, but they haven't come in yet. Being in Italy means that anything I purchase from the US takes about 2 weeks to get here. I have tried purchasing things off of the Italian Amazon, but unfortunately we live in an apartment complex where I don't have a place for packages to go, so they have to call me. And when they call me and I pick up my cell phone and they realize I'm not a native Italian speaker, they will just hang up the phone and say the customer wasn't home. This has happened to us so many times. My husband has had to go down to the warehouse, and when you go to the warehouse, they don't just hand you your package. They get your information so that they can go into the warehouse and set your item aside, but then you have to come back the next day to actually pick it up. So even after it's been delivered, if you have to go pick it up, it's like another 48 hours. And one time we bought a Christmas cake and the tracking just said that it was delivered. It was never delivered. We never got our Christmas cake. So now I just don't even bother. Now I am going to be using pale yellow for the little centers of the flowers in my chamomile. And using a little bit of the latte brown for shading. And I've decided to bring that same pale yellow down into my calendar to give it a little bit more color. For the calendula, I've pulled lemon yellow, olive green, and deep green as my colors, but I don't actually use the lemon yellow. I stick with olive green as the base and I use deep green as the shadows. Those two greens will actually be the basis for the majority of the plants that I'm going to be painting today. I also want to add that I'm using a glaze medium today, and it acts similar as water does in watercolor. The glaze medium, when added to gouache or acrylic, keeps the paint from drying out, and if you play with the ratios, you can actually paint like a transparency. Now I'm going in on top of that olive green with the deep green as shadows. I don't like how dark the outlines look with the deep green, so I come back with a little bit of water and glaze medium and kind of like blur the lines a little bit, and I like the look much better. For the chamomile side, I'm adding sage green instead of the olive green because chamomile has a bluish tint to its green, similar to eucalyptus also has it. And I gotta tell you, these leaves are way easier to paint than they are when you're trying to draw them with a pen. Adding in the shading. I'm using lemon yellow for the calendula flowers. For the chamomile flowers, since they're white, but they're going to be on a white background, I added a little bit of a violet with white, but it wound up being too dark, so I just kept adding white until you get this kind of grayish white, and then I went on top of that with pure white, and it at least gave it a little dimension. I know you probably won't be able to tell the difference, but I actually tried. I decided to add the lunar phases to my quick glance calendar just because it does help keep me on track. And here's the finished cover page. It took me a little longer than I would like, but I'm happy with the way it turned out. Now onto my spellwork and content planner page. The past couple of months I've lumped them into one page because I do frequently less spellwork in the wintertime, but now that it's summer, the summer solstice, we're bright, longer days, I probably will be doing more. So this time I made a 2-page spread. For the hanging rack, I'm using a mixture of toffee and burnt umber. This first bundle of herbs is probably the easiest, and I just wanted it to look like some parsley or cilantro that's hanging, and pretty much it's just a bunch of dabbing with my brush in different shades of green. The next two bunches are lavender stems, which is pretty much the same thing. You just draw the stems and then you dab the ends with purple. And I did 2 lavenders on this side and I think 2 on the other side as well, just because they're really simple and colorful. The next 2 plants are rosemary plants, and they're really simple. You just do little tiny strokes. My base is in the olive green, but later I'm going to come back and do a top of sage green. Now this plant is a trust the process plant because I wanted it to look like old sage, and sage, whenever it dries, it gets like a reddish brown tint to it. So it's gonna look crazy, but I promise it'll make sense when it's done. Here I'm doing a base undercoat of the deep green, and you'll notice that I don't do the whole plant, which I come to regret later. I kind of wish I had done the shadows under the whole plant because it changes the color on the top. You'll see what I mean in a bit, but if you notice, I'm not filling the whole thing up. That was on purpose, but don't be stupid like me. My trust the process sage is about to look even weirder, but take it from future Tiffany. It turns out okay. Trust the process. It's gonna look weird. Now it's time to bring in the olive green, and here's where you start to see it kind of taking shape. It doesn't look so weird anymore, and you still get those hints of the dark and the purple underneath. And here's where I go over the rosemary with the sage green. I just want to give it some more color and a little spark of some light to it. And this is going to be my oregano plant, which is done almost the same way as I did the cilantro. Instead of, I add some leaves, and then down where the bunches of greenery is, I'm going to add the little red flowers. And the flowers are going to be in various shades of rose. Now I'm going over the mint with the olive green. You'll notice that I'm bouncing back and forth a lot, and that's to give each layer some time to dry before I put on the next layer. On this particular plant, I leave some white space open, but I later come back and fill that up because I had hoped to make it look sparse, but in the end it just looked unfinished, so I do fix that. Now we're on to the lemon balm, and this is where I told you earlier that I regretted not doing the dark green all the way on the back on the second one. You'll see it in just a second, but the greens that pop on top of this dark is really, really nice, but they almost go lime green and transparent whenever there's not a background. And here is where I do a quick underlayment and I let it dry just to have something under the color. And while I wait on that to dry, I'm gonna go ahead and work on the other plants. Because I didn't do the underpainting of shadows, I'm going back in now and adding shadows at the very top just so you can see some differences in the leaves. This is going to be thyme, and when thyme is dried, the stems become kind of brown, so I'm going to lay a layer of brown down and let that dry. For the strings hanging the herbs up, I'm using a mixture of toffee and white. Don't forget, if you visit my website and sign up for my newsletter, you'll get free access to this printable as well as others in my grimoire section. Just sign up, receive the email with the special code, enter it on the grimoire section of my website, and you're in. It's that easy. Make sure to bookmark that page because each month will be updated with new pages. The thyme is painted just like we did the lavender, but instead of purple, you use green. Now remember whenever I was talking about how you can get a transparency with the glaze medium? I'm mixing lemon yellow and the glaze medium, and I'm just going to go over top of a couple of the leaves because I want it to look like the sun is hitting it, just a slight yellow shimmer. Now I'm adding in some last minute shadows and highlights. And ta-da! We're finally finished. Whew, this one took a lot longer than I thought, but I'm really happy with it. And now on to our final spread: habits, goals, and schedule. Like last month, I'm keeping my schedule to a 1-page just because that's what works best for me. As I've said before, you've already seen me do lettering, so I'm just going to skim through this really quickly. I'm using my Micron number 5. And now for the basilico, I'm going to be using my tried and true olive green and deep green. I want the pot to look like a terracotta pot, so I'm going to be using a mixture of the saffron orange and the latte brown. I usually have some sort of music playing in the background, but I worried that it may have been like overpowering my voice, so I've cut it out. But now I get like these awkward pauses when there's nothing to talk about. So tell me down in the comments below if you prefer music in the background or if you just want it silent. I'm strictly using the lemon yellow for my highlights, but I'm doing it while my paint is wet, so it kind of gets blended in. Since there's not much to say here, because I'm just painting, I wanted to take a moment to say that if you've been following along with my tarot series, where I explain each of the major arcana, I now have them located at the top under the series to make it easier for you to find all the blog posts all in one place. And with a couple of last minute highlights, this page is done. I think it's simple and cute, but I kind of worry if the top is a little too empty now that I'm editing it, but oh well. On to my schedule. I wanted these little tendrils to look like they were growing out from the mortar and pestle. The overflow of the flowers and the kind of chaotic nature of this made this page really difficult for me. Like, I spent an entire day on this and I got so frustrated at one point that I had to step away. But I like the way it came out, but it was very overwhelming for me. For the mortar and pestle, I'm using the same color combination that I used for the pot on the other page. And here is where my frustrations began. This was not my finest moment. It's some sort of weird leaf blob thing. I do regret it, and I tried to fix it multiple times to no avail. For the peppercorns and the chocolate and the almonds, I'm using these 3 different colored browns, and I'm gonna mix them in various shades so that there's different colors. You can hardly tell, but I promise you, if you zoom into the peppercorns, there are different browns in there. And here is my second regret with this page. I used rose because I wanted to bring in a little color, but it just does not look right. And I tried to work with it, and I tried to darken, I tried to change, I tried to add some red. It just doesn't work. I shouldn't have used it. My next mistake, I chose the wrong color green to line this, and I do come back later with a green glaze to try to like merge it to a better color. And my next mistake, whatever the hell this is. Next up, I'm using lilac and mauve to make some more lavender because I don't seem to screw that up. Still trying to fix whatever the heck this is. I'm using scarlet red to add some berries to my plants. When I'm feeling very frustrated, I will procrastinate. I will do everything except what I should be doing. So instead of focusing on the leaves and all the plants that I still need to add, I've decided I want to shade. I need shading. So I'm actually shading all the vines where they would intertwine because I want to do anything but those leaves. After shading, I took my dog for a walk because, of course, more procrastination. And I came across a lot of goldenrod, which I'm allergic to, but it gave me inspiration, so the little twiggies I'm drawing are actually for some beautiful yellow goldenrod. I'm adding what I think I meant for to be rosemary. And here's what I mean by it starts to get hard to tell you colors because I'm just mixing everything on this plate. Lemon yellow and saffron orange for the goldenrod. Ah, my beautiful nemesis. How thee has fucked up my nose. Finally done with that part, I'm going to use my Micron 1 to write in the dates of my schedule, and that is that. I'm finally finished with that schedule nightmare of a page. So this is the overview of the whole spread. Let's take a look at the finished product. What was your favorite page? I know they all took a little longer than I usually do, but if there was one that really stood out to you, can you leave it in the comments below? If you've made it this long in my video, would you consider liking and subscribing? It would mean the world to me. Love you!